We all have those stories, right? The
Yeah.
ones that feel like old friends, the ones we think we know inside and out.
Oh, absolutely. We've heard them so many times.
But what if those familiar tales, the ones we think we've got completely figured out, what if they held a secret?
A secret.
Yeah, like a hidden layer, something that could help us understand something bigger, something beyond the story itself. And that's exactly what we're going to do today, right here, as we take a fresh look at a classic, a timeless classic, Charles Dickens's A Christmas Carol.
I love it. And we're not just going to, settle in for a cozy reread. I mean, we're going deep right.
Oh yeah, we're going deep.
We're going to use this really powerful tool, this framework called system dynamics.
Ooh, system dynamics. Sounds complicated.
It's not as bad as it sounds. Think of it as a way of understanding how different parts of a situation, like all the different pieces,
Yeah.
how they connect and influence each other.
Okay, so like cause and effect, but more intricate.
Exactly. It's about how those causes and effects create patterns over time.
Hmm.
We're going to be focusing on those repeating patterns, what we call feedback loops, and the core beliefs that fuel them. And then ultimately, we're going to see how change actually happens, both in, Scrooge's world, but also maybe even in our own lives.
That's what's so cool about this, right?
Yeah.
That even a story we've heard a million times, like A Christmas Carol,
A million times at least.
can offer these surprising insights into how our lives and the world around us actually function. Like, whoa, it's all interconnected. It makes you think.
Yeah.
Have you ever actually stopped to think about your own life as a system, with all these different parts influencing each other?
I think a lot of people probably haven't, but when you do, it's eye-opening. And actually, when we look at Scrooge's journey through the systems lens, we see this really powerful engine, this dynamic that's driving all his unhappiness. It's like, whoa, that's what's making him so miserable.
Okay, so let's talk about that engine. What's the main dynamic that's shaping Scrooge's life before the ghosts show up? What's at the core of it all?
I think it boils down to this concept we call a reinforcing feedback loop.
A reinforcing feedback loop. Okay, break that down for me. What does that even mean?
All right, imagine this. A microphone that gets way too close to a speaker.
Oh no, that screeching sound.
Exactly. That's feedback. The sound gets amplified, it feeds back into the mic, and it gets even louder, right?
Yeah, that's a horrible sound.
Oh.
Makes me cringe just thinking about it.
Well, Scrooge's greed and selfishness, they kind of work the same way.
So his greed is like that screeching feedback.
In a way, yeah. He obsesses over hoarding wealth, and a natural consequence of that is that he ends up isolated. I mean, he pushes everyone away, avoids real connections with people.
Makes sense if you're only focused on money.
Exactly. And then that isolation, well, guess what? It actually intensifies his focus on his possessions. So he needs more and more money, more stuff, almost as a way to, fill that void of human connection.
So it's like a vicious cycle. Loneliness fuels the greed. Greed makes him more lonely.
Exactly. And it just keeps feeding on itself, a really destructive pattern.
A downward spiral. So what's the underlying energy, the thing that keeps this whole cycle going? What are the fundamental drivers behind all of this?
I'd say it's his belief systems.
Belief systems.
Yeah, those deeply ingrained assumptions that we all have about how the world works, what's important in life. Scrooge's beliefs, well, they basically justify all of his bad behavior and keep that negative loop spinning.
And the sources we've looked at highlight some big ones, right?
Definitely.
Okay, so let's break down a few of these core beliefs that seem to be, really steering Scrooge. And the first one that always jumps out to me is this idea of wealth equals security.
Oh, that's a classic. And, it really resonates when you think about his background, right?
Yeah, his childhood. He didn't have it easy, that's for sure.
Right. The research really points to that difficult childhood, to a deep-seated fear of poverty as the likely root of this belief. So for Scrooge, getting money, it's not just about being comfortable. It goes way deeper. It's about feeling safe, protected, like he's built a wall between himself and all the bad stuff he's experienced.
So it's like his security blanket, but made of money.
Exactly. And that belief, well, it directly leads to that obsessive hoarding. And it explains why he refuses to be generous. I mean, why would he give away the very thing he believes is keeping him safe?
It's like he's built this emotional fortress out of money. He can't let anything weaken the walls. Another belief that really stands out, and this one obviously plays a huge part in his isolation, is relationships are risky.
Oh, definitely. That one's a biggie. And again, the sources suggest that this belief comes from his past, from old heartbreaks, from losing people he cared about.
So he's been hurt before.
Right. And now, in Scrooge's mind, Anytime he forms a close bond with someone, it opens him up to getting hurt again. So the safest thing he can do, the way he minimizes the risk in his own mind, is to just withdraw, to keep everyone at a distance.
And of course, that fuels the isolation part of the feedback loop we were talking about.
Exactly. And it can become this self-fulfilling prophecy. He avoids relationships to avoid pain, which leads to loneliness. And that loneliness reinforces his belief that people are unreliable or that he's better off alone. It's a trap.
Yeah, it's like a trap. And then there's self-reliance is superior. That one always strikes me as, well, a bit harsh.
It does have a harshness to it, right? I
Mhm.
think it speaks to Scrooge's deep pride in working hard and being frugal, but it also leads him to look down on people who he sees as less industrious or who need help. In his worldview, needing help means you're weak.
So there's no room for compassion in that worldview.
Not really. And of course, that belief also reinforces his disdain for the poor, and justifies why he's so selfish. In his mind, why should he help someone who he doesn't think is pulling their own weight?
It's a very individualistic way of seeing the world.
Very much so.
And I guess that leads us right to the belief that generosity is unproductive.
Yeah.
It's almost like he can't even fathom the idea of giving to others.
You're right. He just doesn't see any real value in it. He views generosity as this pointless act that won't lead to anything good, anything tangible, at least not for him. It's cynicism, pure and simple, but it allows him to excuse his own tight-fistedness.
Right. And it's all connected to that next belief. The world is a harsh place. It's such a bleak outlook.
It is. It's what we call a scarcity mindset. He believes that life is this constant struggle, a competition where everyone's out for themselves, and you got to protect what's yours no matter what.
It's a pretty lonely way to live.
It is. And of course, believing that the world is such a harsh place only fuels the greed and selfishness. If you believe that everyone's out to get you, then hoarding resources becomes an act of self-preservation.
Like a survival instinct almost.
Right. It's like, I gotta get mine before someone else takes it. And the last one we have, well, this one feels particularly relevant today, even though the story's so old. Time is money.
Tell me about it. My to-do list is a mile long.
But for Scrooge, time isn't about getting things done. It's purely a resource to exploit for financial gain. Anything that doesn't lead to money, like being kind, spending time with family, or just enjoying life.
Those are all wastes of time in Scrooge's mind.
Absolutely. They're not productive. And that belief, again, directly contributes to his isolation and his lack of empathy for others.
Okay, so we've got this really deeply rooted system of greed, isolation, all powered by this network of beliefs, all feeding off each other. It's like he's stuck in this prison he's built for himself. How does he even begin to break out of this? I mean, that's where the ghosts come in, right? They're not just like spooky Halloween visitors.
Oh, they're way more than that. The way the sources describe it, the three ghosts act as systemic interventions.
Systemic interventions. Okay, what does that mean?
Well, it means they're there to disrupt those deeply entrenched beliefs that Scrooge has, to force him to really look at his life, at the dynamics of his whole existence, but from different angles, from different perspectives.
So like they're shaking things up.
Yeah, they're shaking up his whole system. They're there to show him things he can't see on his own.
Okay, let's start with the Ghost of Christmas Past. What's its role in all of this?
Well, The Ghost of Christmas Past is all about giving Scrooge a historical perspective on his own system.
A blast from the past.
Yeah, exactly. It takes him back to those big moments, those defining moments in his life that shaped the beliefs he has today.
And that's so powerful in the story, right?
It's like, think of tracing the roots of a tree to see how it grew into its current shape. That's what this ghost is doing for Scrooge.
I love that analogy.
And we see those really poignant scenes, right? His lonely childhood, the love he had for a sister fan, and of course, the heartbreak of losing Belle.
Oh, poor Belle.
I know, but these weren't just random things that happened, They were formative experiences, and they really ingrained those feelings of fear, of loss, and that incredible need for self-preservation.
So it's about understanding the root causes of his beliefs.
Exactly. And by actually reliving those moments, Scrooge is able to connect the dots to see how those past events directly shaped his current beliefs and behaviors. It's like the system showing him its own history, like a flashback to how things got to be the way they are.
And that's what's so crucial, right? Understanding the origins of the system, the initial conditions, so to speak, the starting point that set everything in motion. And then we have the Ghost of Christmas Present, the here and now. What does this spirit reveal about Scrooge's system?
Well, the Ghost of Christmas Present shifts the focus from the past to the present.
So it's about the current state of his system.
Yes, exactly. It's like taking a snapshot of his life in this moment, showing him how his system is actually functioning in real time.
And that's where we see such a stark contrast, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Scrooge has all this wealth, but
Mhm.
it's just sitting there doing nothing for anyone. And then there's the Cratchit family. They're struggling. They have so little, yet they still manage to find joy and connection.
Right. And they have that amazing sense of community, a warmth that's completely missing from Scrooge's isolated world.
It's like a direct comparison of two very different systems.
It is. And it forces Scrooge to ask himself, how is my system actually working today? What impact am I having on the world, on the people around me right now?
Right. It's not just some abstract idea anymore. It's real people's lives.
Exactly. Scrooge is witnessing the immediate effects of his choices, the consequences of his inaction, his greed. He sees Bob Cratchit struggling, he sees Tiny Tim's frail health, and he's forced to confront the reality of his own selfishness. He's also seeing the joy and connection that exists in the world, despite him, highlighting what his choices have cost him and others in real time.
It's like the system itself is giving him a diagnosis. It's saying,
Right.
look, this is what's broken. This is the pain and imbalance you are creating right now.
Exactly.
And then we have the most unsettling of the three ghosts, the ghost of Christmas yet to come. It's the one that always gives me chills. What does this ghost offer Scrooge?
Well, this ghost gives him a glimpse into the future.
The future.
Yeah, but it's not just any future. It's the future that will unfold if he stays on the same path.
So it's the future trajectory of his system if nothing changes.
Exactly. It's a projection, a what-if scenario. It shows him the potential consequences of his actions, of his choices, of his, inaction.
And it's a really bleak picture, right? Tiny Tim is gone. Scrooge dies alone. Nobody even cares.
It is. It's really the ultimate outcome of his greed and isolation. It's a vision of complete systemic breakdown, a collapse of everything, at least for Scrooge and for those in his orbit. And, this ghost is answering the question, where is the system headed if nothing changes?
That's like a warning.
It is. And it forces him to confront those devastating consequences. Because this isn't just about Scrooge being unhappy. It's about the ripple effects, the loss and despair that will inevitably happen if he stays on this path. And it's this vision, this really stark vision, that finally makes him realize, hey, I have to change. I have to do something different. It's the system showing him its potential for catastrophic failure.
Right. It's like the system screaming, wake up, you're headed for disaster.
Yeah. Exactly. And what's really important about Scrooge's transformation, it's not just that he decides to be, nicer, to be more generous. It goes way deeper than that. It's a fundamental shift in those core beliefs that we were talking about.
Mm.
It's a complete systemic change within himself.
So it's not just about changing his behavior. It's about changing his whole outlook.
Yes. His actions, like being generous or kind, well, those are the results of a much deeper change that's happening inside. He starts to question those old beliefs, to challenge them, and ultimately to dismantle them, brick by brick.
So he's rewiring his whole belief system.
Exactly. It's like reprogramming the code of his personal operating system.
And we see this really clearly in his actions. He starts to understand that true security, that real sense of safety and stability, it doesn't come from hoarding wealth. It comes from those deep, meaningful relationships that he's been avoiding his whole life.
I agree. And he realizes that generosity, well, it's not a waste. It actually creates those positive feedback loops. It benefits everyone involved.
Right, the giver and the receiver.
And he sees that those emotional connections that he's been so afraid of, well, they offer a type of fulfillment, a lasting sense of peace and stability that money could never buy. It's like finally he's getting it.
He's finally waking up to what really matters. And what's amazing is that as Scrooge shifts from hoarding to giving, we see those positive ripple effects spreading outward. The Cratchit family, their situation starts to improve. And even his whole community feels a sense of uplift.
And that's a perfect example of how system dynamics works in real life. By changing one key element within a system, especially those deep-seated beliefs that we all have, you can trigger huge positive changes throughout that whole system. It's like a chain reaction of goodness.
And that's what makes A Christmas Carol so relevant, even today. It really brings those timeless themes into a very modern context. It makes me think, especially around the holidays when we hear the story so much, it makes me think about our own beliefs and the systems that we're all part of.
Oh, absolutely. It's a story about personal reflection, but it's also about understanding how we impact those around us. Just like Scrooge, we are all part of so many different systems. our families, our workplaces, our communities. And our actions, or even our inactions, well, they have a ripple effect. They directly shape those systems.
So as our listeners are thinking about this, what are some questions that they can ask themselves? How can they start to view their own lives and the world around them through this systems lens?
Well, I think a great place to start is to think about feedback loops. What are those repeating patterns in your own life, both the good ones and the ones that might be holding you back? And then, maybe even more importantly, what are the leverage points? Where can you make a small change, a shift in your thinking that could create the biggest positive impact, either in your own life or in your community?
I love that. Look for those leverage points. Because ultimately it all comes back to that central idea. The systems we operate within are shaped by the beliefs that we hold, both individually and collectively. And when we understand and challenge those beliefs, well, we can change those systems. We can make them better.
I agree. By really understanding the dynamics at play, those feedback loops and the beliefs that drive them, well, we become more than just passengers. We become active participants, and we can start to steer those systems in a more positive direction.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into A Christmas Carol, the big takeaway is that even the most familiar stories, the ones we think we know by heart, can offer us these really profound insights into how the world works, especially when we look at them through a new lens.
And in this case, that lens is system dynamics. It's a powerful way to understand change, both in stories and in our own lives.
So we want to leave you, our listener, with this. Think about just one belief that you hold, maybe one you haven't really thought about too deeply in a while. How might changing that one belief, even slightly, create these unexpected positive ripple effects, not just in your life, but in the lives of those around you? What's one tiny intervention, one small change that you can make in your own little world this week?
We can all be Scrooges in our own way.
We can all be Scrooges, but we can also choose to change.
And it's never too late.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays.